Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. So we have this Classic Arena Takedown tournament that is ongoing. This tournament is part of the Yuletide Titan event, for which the grand prize is the legendary dwarf champion, Tormin the Cold. Now, if you're going after Tormin the Cold, you may need the points from this takedown tournament, but as you can see, there's an additional challenge here. It is a faction-specific tournament, which means you need to build your team out of Shadowkin champions only. Now, yesterday I put out a shorts video appealing to the community for everyone to put in one-man defenses on their arena defense so that everyone has a chance of getting these points and continuing their progress towards Tormin the Cold. However, we know some people aren't going to do that, and even those who do, we still have to put together an arena offense team that can get the job done. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to do that out of Shadowkin only champions. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Hey folks, Future Colred here, and I just wanted to mention that I have finally enabled memberships to my YouTube channel. So if you go to the main page here, you'll see there is a new join button. And if you click on that join button, you'll get this pop-up that just describes the various subscription levels and the perks associated with each. So if you're looking to support the channel in a new way and maybe get some cool perks for yourself, you should come check it out. But as always, everybody is welcome, and you can always support me by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. Now let's get back to that video. Okay, so here I am in the Shadowkin Index. Now I'm not going to talk about too many legendaries because I'm a free-to-play player, and I think most of you who are watching probably are low spenders and free-to-play players. And so we live in the epic and rare rarities. But I do want to mention two legendaries here briefly. The first is Ninja. Most players won't have Ninja, but he was free at one point in time. So if you happen to have him, I just want to mention that by default, his AI uses his A2 in Arena, and the A3 is the much better nuke. So you are either going to want to manual Ninja, or you're going to want to make sure that you change his AI for auto battles so that it prioritizes his A3. The second legendary I want to mention is Tatsu, because she is part of the permanent fusion for Lady Mikage. So you may have access to Tatsu right now. Now, if you are holding off on fusing her, now may be a good time to fuse her and level her up. You need her at 6 stars for the Lady Mikage fusion anyway, and at 6 stars, she is a decent arena nuker. She's not on par with some of the other damage dealers in the faction, but if you're looking for a good nuker, she can definitely get the job done with her A2. It hits decently hard, and as you can see, she has a very high base attack, good speed, and the extra crit damage. So even though her multipliers aren't phenomenal, she will do a very good job if you don't have another option. Okay, so now let's talk about some epics. Now, the first thing you probably want to get squared away is your damage dealer. And if you don't have one of the legendary damage dealers, out of the epic champions, the best one by far for Arena is Genbo the Dishonored. Now, Genbo was a free champion as an Amazon Prime reward last year, so many of you may have him, or maybe you've gotten lucky and pulled him from a Void Shard. But either way, this guy is great, and you should probably build him out anyway, but if you've been holding on to him and not building him yet, you're going to want to build him for this tournament. In the entire faction, he has the second best aura for Arena of speed in arena battles by 20%. The only better one actually belongs to the Void legendary Shujen. Now, he has an extra turn mechanic where he gives himself an increased crit rate buff and an increased crit damage buff. Then he gets the extra turn, and then he's got a great AoE nuke here. In addition, he has a passive that allows him to ignore unkillable buffs when attacking under an increased attack buff. You're definitely going to want to bring one of those buffs on your team somewhere. After Genbo, in terms of damage, there's really a clear second choice, and that should be Nagorio. Now, Nagorio's A3 hits pretty hard. He also has a lot of synergies with increased attack buffs. So again, if you're going with a go first arena team or an attack-based arena team, you're going to want to bring an increased attack buff anyway. And so Nagorio can be a really good second option to Genbo. Now, I think these are the two best nukers in the epic rarity. And if you don't have one of them, you're going to have to start stretching a little bit. So let's talk about some other options. For an attack-based option, I think Chani is okay. She doesn't hit nearly as hard as Nagorio, but she still does a decent job. She's got even a better attack stat than he does, but her multipliers are a little bit worse. Now, Chani's A3 is not bad. It is an AoE, and it has an 80% chance when booked of increasing the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. So you can actually use her sort of as a mini nuker or as a debuff extender. If you're looking for more of a defense-based damage dealer, there aren't a ton, but Kunoichi can do in a pinch. Now, her A2 is an AoE that has a 100% chance when booked of placing a leech debuff for 1 turn. She also has an ally protect on her A3. She has a weaken on her A1, and she has a passive which puts a block damage on herself whenever she drops below 50% HP. Although this will only happen once every 5 turns. So she could be a champion that can be really hard to take off the board, and she can actually extend the life of your team. So if you're building more of a defense-focused team, she may be a great champion for that team. She's not really a nuker, but like I said, we're kind of desperate here, and she can do in a pinch. Now, regardless of whether you go with a defensive-based team or an attack-based team, you may want to look at some turn meter fill, especially if you're just trying to get a fast team. Going first is so powerful in Arena, and there are a few champions here that can help you do that. Probably the best of this batch is Sachi. Now, Sachi's A3 gives a nice turn meter fill of 20% in addition to a 50% increased attack buff. However, the turn meter fill is conditional. It requires Sachi to land a critical hit. So you're going to need to build her with a 100% crit rate, and then make sure when you are targeting that you avoid spirit affinity targets. That way you won't weak hit. In addition to this turn meter fill, she also has a conditional revive, which isn't that bad. She revives a random ally with 30% HP whenever she kills an enemy. If she does revive that champion, she has a 50% chance of placing a fear on all enemies for 1 turn. Now, the second turn meter champion I want to mention here is Tomoe. Now, Tomoe is an interesting champion, but she can be very good in any Shadowkin-based team because she has a lot of synergies that are based around being with members of her own faction. For instance, you can see that her passive here increases all heals and turn meter fill effects by 20% when used on allies from the Shadowkin faction. So that means any 15% turn meter fill is going to become an 18% turn meter fill. Any 20% turn meter fill will become a 24% turn meter fill. So this is great for this particular type of tournament because everybody's going to be a Shadowkin. Now, her personal turn meter fill is 15%. It should be 18%. And this also places an increased crit damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Additionally, it will place a crit rate buff on anybody from the Shadowkin faction. So everybody will be getting crit rate and crit damage. Now, the really nice thing about this is that works well with every type of damage dealer, defense, HP, or attack. So you can really put her as a buffer and turn meter filler on any team that you want. Additionally, she does have an AoE that has a drop attack that's 100% chance when booked. Now, she's not going to hit terribly hard, but this can be a debuff that's very valuable on a defensive-based team. It's just going to extend your life if your enemy can't hit very hard. It's also an AoE, and any support that you have that has an AoE, you can consider putting in a stun set. Remember that the stuns that proc from a stun set cannot be resisted, so it just ignores resistance. They can be blocked, but they can't be resisted. So that's another consideration for a champion like Tomoe. I want to mention one defensive-based turn meter filler, and that is Masamoto. Now, I don't particularly think Masamoto is a great champion, but he does have a very good skill for this tournament, and that is his A3. This places a 60% increased defense, so the big increased defense, on all allies for 2 turns. It also fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. So if you have a defensive-based team and you want to go first or you want to go faster, Masamoto can help you do that job. In addition, he also has that AoE with a decreased attack. Now this books to a 75% chance, but again, you can put him in a stun set for this reason. Now, something to note here with a lot of these champions is if you're not going to be booking them out, that's fine if you're on a go first team. But if you're trying to extend the life of your team many rounds, it may be more valuable to actually book some of these champions. And so in that particular case, you want to question whether or not you want to bring Masamoto. Maybe you want to bring him unbooked, or maybe you want to book one of the attack-based champions instead. Because like I said, I think he's an okay champion, but unless you really need him for faction crypts, you're not going to find a lot of places where you're going to get huge value out of this guy outside of the faction or this tournament. Again, he's not bad, but maybe he's not good enough to fully invest in. Okay, now for the final turn meter fill champion, I actually want to mention one of my favorite champions in this faction, and that is Kinagashi. Now, you're going to want to build Kinagashi regardless, at least to 50, because she is the most reliable reviver in the entire faction, and you're going to need her for faction crypts. So this revives an ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, pretty solid. Also places a 60% increased defense buff on that ally for 2 turns. So really good with a defensive-based team. She also brings this A2, which fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. but it's also an ally attack. Now, it's just going to be one random ally to attack one single enemy. But remember, if you bring in, say, Sachi, who has an AoE on her A1 in a stun set, then this ally attack could potentially activate that AoE. Likewise, there are some other A1s that we're going to talk about in just a little bit that could be valuable in an ally attack. Okay, so now that you've got your damage dealers and your turn meter fillers, we're going to talk about some defensive-based champions that may help you flesh out a go second team or just a tanky team that could go first or go second. The first champion to mention is Hatatsu because of his aura. So he has the best defensive-based aura that you're going to probably have available to you, and that is defense in all battles by 25%. In addition, he does place a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, and he actually brings some continuous heals. You don't have a lot of sustain in this faction, and this is one of the few champions that's going to help you bring that, because not only does he have those continuous heals, he also has a leech on his A1. Finally, this is another champion that brings an AoE decrease attack. You could put him in a stun set again because of this AoE, but you do want him to have enough accuracy to land this decrease attack. Finally, his passive is nice because it removes one random debuff from him every turn, and it starts with the CCs. So all in all, a great kit, and this is one of those champions that can actually provide a lot of value outside of this tournament. So if you're thinking about taking somebody in the faction up to 6 stars, Hatatsu would be near the top of the list. So there are 2 additional champions I think you could get a lot of value out of, one of which is Toragi the Frog. Now, for this particular tournament, we're most interested in his A2, which is a 50% chance of placing a provoke on an AoE. This chance actually increases for each debuff on the enemy team by 5%. So if you have another champion who's landed a decreased attack or a weaken or a decreased defense or even poisons, this is going to increase Toragi's chance to land his provoke. Now, he does have a valuable kit all around. Now, his A3 is actually an excellent ally protect. It places a shield buff equal to 15% of his max HP and a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except him for 2 turns. It also heals him by 25% of his max HP, so that's some built-in sustain, and then puts a 30% reflect damage buff on him. So this is a really good ability that's going to extend the life of your team, including Toragi the Frog. Finally, he has a decreased attack on his A1, which makes him really good in boss fights. So again, another champion you could get value out of outside of this tournament. The last champion I want to mention in the epic rarity is Burngiri. Burngiri has an AoE stun on his A2. It's a pretty good chance at 60% when booked. In addition, he has provokes on his A1. He also has a strengthen buff on his A3, and that skill will also place a shield buff for 2 turns on allies with less than 50% HP. It's not a huge shield, but it's one of the few ways we can actually increase the survivability of our team after perhaps they've been attacked by the enemy team. Finally, he's very hard to remove from the board because of his passive, so he heals by 50% of his max HP every time an ally or an enemy dies. So he can really provide a tanky backbone to your team with his kit. Now, potentially you can get some value out of other champions that I haven't mentioned, but I just wanted to give you an idea that there are, in fact, a ton of epics in this faction that can do a good job for you in the arena if you put a team around them that synergizes well with them. Now let's move on to a couple of rare champions that can actually help you with that as well. So there are 3 rare champions that I think have any value for this particular tournament. The worst of the 3 is probably Assassin. Now, the reason I'm mentioning Assassin is not because he's any good at all, but because he has one of the few speed auras that can work in the arena. Now, this is only 10% of ally speed, but sometimes that's all you need. So if you're looking for a go first team and you don't have a better aura, you can throw Assassin into your team. Remember that you can throw him in at level 1. You don't have to build him. You don't have to book him. That aura will be permanent once he spawns in. If he dies, who cares? His kit doesn't really bring anything into the arena other than maybe he has a chance of a lesser weaken on one enemy. The rest of his kit is based around poisons. And so basically he's a throwaway champion, but one that could be usable if you just need that speed aura. As far as the other rares are concerned, I think probably the best all-around rare is Odachi. Now, Odachi is somebody you could build for faction crypts, take him up to 40 or 50 and get value out of him there. And so you could potentially already have him built. Just throw him into your arena team. Now, he brings a skill that we haven't seen yet, which is a block debuffs buff on all allies for 1 turn. He also places the lesser increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now, block debuffs tends to be best if you go first and get that up, and then when the enemy team goes, they can't debuff you. So you would need him running pretty fast to get the maximum value out of this buff. But I wanted to mention it because nobody else has it, at least in the champions that I've mentioned. Secondly, he does have an AoE. So you can, again, think about putting him in a stun set. His A1 is similar to Burn Geary's, I think, in that it has a low chance of provoking one target. So not a bad champion, not a great champion, but one of the better rares in the faction. And so if you're just looking to fill out that team, he can provide some value. So finally, I think the best rare in this faction for this particular tournament is Vagabond. Now, Vagabond's an okay rare. Most people don't really think about her too much, but she does have this skill that's highly useful for this tournament, and that is this A3. It fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and places a 25% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So I didn't mention her before with the other turn meter fillers because those were all epics, but she is the only rare that gives you this turn meter fill. And it is combined with an increased attack buff. Now it's the smaller increased attack buff, but if you're running Genbo or you're running Nagorio, you're going to want an increased attack buff somewhere. And that turn meter fill combined with that increased attack buff can be a very powerful skill for a go first team. Now, remember that you will want to build her fast for that. So it can be tricky to do that, say if she's at level 40, but if you can reach the speeds that you need to speed tune properly, she can do her entire job, which is basically that A3 at whatever level you're running her at. So a very cheap investment for potentially a lot of reward. All right, so now let's actually jump into Classic Arena and take a look at some teams. The first thing I want to say is I put out a shorts video yesterday asking everyone in the community to put in a one-man defense and just make it really easy for the community to all get the points they need in this tournament in pursuit of Tormin the Cold. So as you can see, I put in a level 40 Basher. He is unbuilt. There is no gear on this guy. So if you see him up here, go ahead and take him out, get yourself a free win. But I highly recommend that everybody do this. Remember that when you're putting in a one-man defense, a one-champion defense, the purpose of that is to give away free wins. So please don't put in like a Paragon Cheese team. Don't put in a fully built UDK as your one-man defense. That just slows everybody down. It's going to increase the failure rate. Just put in a nice squishy champion that everybody can remove, regardless of the Shadowkin team they're able to put together. I feel like we're all in this together. So thanks for listening. So as you can see, I am here in Gold 5. I do have a level 100 account. I am endgame. I've been playing for about 2.5 years. So even though I have a free-to-play account, I had some choices in terms of who I was going to bring in to my team. So let me go ahead and show you the team that I put together. Okay, so here is my arena team. You can see I do have 2 legendaries. I have Ninja and I have Lady Kimmy. She's one of my new favorite champions. I pulled her just a few months ago. And so this team has pretty much everything I need. I do have some turn meter fill. I have Sachi here, who brings that turn meter fill and increase attack. I also have Lady Kimmy, who brings an increase speed buff with her turn meter fill. I have Genbo, who has the speed aura of 20%. And then I have 2 attack-based nukers who are going to both benefit from Sachi's increased attack. So this is a go first team. And you can see I'm up against an Arbiter defense here. Now, Arbiter has a much larger aura of 30%, and she's potentially faster than some of my champions. But my Lady Kimmy, I'll show you my Lady Kimmy. She's running very fast. So as you can see, my Lady Kimmy is running very fast at 311 speed. And she has 2 potential openings. So one potential opening is this A3. Now this fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and places an increased accuracy buff and increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this is the typical opener. It also removes 1 random buff from each enemy and has a 100% chance of placing a block buffs debuff on enemies if a buff is removed. This is a very strong opener for a lot of different combos. However, she also has this A2, which is an AoE that's going to hit. So it's a hit, it's going to do some damage, and it has a 100% chance of placing a decreased speed debuff on the enemy for 2 turns, and then also has a chance of decreasing the turn meter of the enemy by 15%. So I actually have some flexibility with Lady Kimmy here, which is one of the reasons why she's so good. I have built my Sachi. She's level 50, you can see, but I've got her to 100% crit rate, 236 speed, which makes her the 2nd fastest champion on my team. Now, Lady Kimmy is going so fast that I won't stay speed tuned. Like this team can be disconnected, but I want Sachi to go second because she's that second turn meter fill. And she also has the increased attack. So I want her going before either of my damage dealer. Genbo is the 3rd fastest at 221. And then Ninja is the 4th fastest at 216. Now, if I could get my Sachi up to say 250, that would probably be a lot better. but this is where I was able to get her without taking her to 6 stars or putting crazy good gear on a champion that I'm not really going to use anywhere else. Okay, so now I'm just going to pick some fights with my team and we're going to see how we do. I am going to take it off auto. I'm going to manual these. Now I have more power than this particular team. You can see the power behind my head. I have 197k and this team is only 161, but they do have an arbiter. They don't have a second turn meter filler, however. So this could be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to win the race or not. Okay, so I have won the speed race, but as you can see, their arbiter is just about ready to go. And I think their Madame Saros also has more turn meter than anybody on my team. So I have to contemplate whether or not I want to use just my turn meter fill. I don't know if it's going to get to Lady Sachi or not. It looks like it might. It looks like it might. So maybe I can jump them in the turn order, and that would allow me to stay connected. Let's see if we can do it. All right, so Lady Sachi did go next. And so now we can get to her A3. This is going to be the increased attack. Now remember, I need to crit here. The good news is I don't have any champions that I'm weak affinity against. So I might just want to pick one that I want to make sure gets as much damage as possible. So let's see if we can hit this Blood Gorge on the outside. We did get the crit and everybody went and got their increased attack buff. And now I'm going to have Genbo give himself increased crit rate and crit damage, and he should nuke out the whole team. And there we go. Now recognize that I do have very good gear and these are very well-built champions. But obviously I'm in gold 5, so I'm going up against some tough opponents. Okay, so now I want to take my team up against somebody with a little bit higher power. So I'm going to take on this team here. You can see they have 243k power. This is a level 60 arbiter. So potentially she could be faster than me. I don't know if my Lady Kimmy is going to be fast enough. But because they don't have any second turn meter fill, there's still a chance that even if arbiter goes first, I might be able to cut in and take over. So we're going to try this one anyway. And in fact, their arbiter is not as fast as I was worried about. So we are going to do Lady Kimmy's A3 that can remove a random buff because we've got some shields out there and a block debuffs. And in fact, we remove all of the buffs. Now we'll use Sachi's attack. We'll probably want to hit, I think, Rhonda, I would guess. Actually, I'm going to hit Nishak Verminlord. All right, so we got our increased attack. Now we're going to self-buff on Genbo and see if we can nuke everybody out. In this case, we didn't, but the good news is that's what our backup ninja is for. So we're going to A3 everybody, and they all go down. Okay, so finally, I do want to take on a defensive-based team just to see how this team can do. I shouldn't have any trouble with the speed race here, but I'm going to take on this UDK team. You can see it's got Duchess, Mithrala, and Pythion. So I might not be able to chew through this team, but we're going to try it just to see how this team actually does against this tanky of a team. So no issue at all winning the speed race. Of course, there wouldn't be. But as you can see, Duchess does have Stone Skin. They also have a bolster set with a shield buff we cannot remove. So we're going to try to remove that Stone Skin, see if we can actually get that off. And we did. That's good. Now let's get our crit rate going. Who do we want to hit? We don't want to hit Duchess. Remember, we are weak affinity into Duchess because Sachi is force affinity. So it doesn't matter anyway because they've got UDK, so it should transfer to UDK, but we're just going to go ahead and hit UDK. Now we're going to self-buff. My guess is we're not going to kill anybody. And in fact, we didn't. But now we can bring our second nuker and see maybe we can kill some champions, but we also have a chance to freeze anybody who survives. So we in fact landed our freeze on both of their revivers, which is great. So the question is, can we kill them off in time? Let's go ahead and use Ninja's A2 and see if the HP burns get some work done. There we go. All right, so that is it for my team. I did build a theoretical team here that's more of a defensive-based team that I quite like. You can see I don't have the champions built out to actually run it, but this would be something that maybe a all-epic-based team might look like. This is a defensive-based team. You have Hatatsu here, who's providing the aura. You do, if we go into the team here, you can see that Kinagashi would be bringing some turn meter fill. You have Masamoto, who would also bring turn meter fill, but you actually need to ascend him to get that third skill. He has it on his A3. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize I didn't have that up. So you have 2 turn meter fillers. It's both 15%. You'll get an increased defense there. Then you have Burengiri, who's a defensive-based champion. He's got the AoE stun. It's going to hit decently hard, slow down the enemy team. And then you've got Hitatsu, who can come in with another AoE, decrease attack. If you need to, you can add that second increased defense later. That's going to give you continuous heals. Kinagashi has that revive. So this is an extremely tanky team that could potentially just wear down maybe a go first team or a weak defense. And so you don't necessarily have to have the champions that I'm running on my team. You just have to put together a team that makes sense in terms of its synergies and its stats. Again, I think all 4 of these champions are pretty solid for faction crypts, so I definitely wouldn't be worried about that. Burengiri is also a great solution for Baumel. Kinagashi is the only reviver in the faction. Hitatsu is great all around. I think Masamoto is a little bit underrated. I actually think he's a solid champ. The 4th best of these 4, but not awful. Okay, so you have about a day and a half left. You have a day and a half left to get those snow points from this classic arena takedown tournament featuring the Shadowkin. So hopefully you can put some of this advice to use, start grinding your points, and get to those snow points. Definitely let me know in the comments below what team you've put together for the Shadowkin faction arena tournament, and if I missed mentioning any champions that you think are worth mentioning to the community. That's it for now. Thanks so much for hanging out. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.